All right, so in this one, we are going to be setting up our cart model to have tax total as well as total price. So I'm going to copy the subtotal and paste it a couple times, and we'll just say tax total and then total. So cart total. And these two are going to be calculated otherwise. Now the tax total itself, we aren't going to actually put the taxed percent here. We're going to use a default percent when we calculate this tax total, and of course that's going to come off of the subtotal itself. Please note that we do not have a shipping total in here yet, so let's add that to the list down here. I'm also going to have the list having discounts as well. We might as well put this up here. So discounts and also shipping, if there is any shipping. So we'll cut these out. Cool. So in this time, we are really just focusing on calculating tax total and the actual total. The discounts and shipping, we're not going to worry about that yet because it's adding a whole different level. All right, so now that we've got this, let's go ahead and make the migrations for it. So we'll do python manage.py, make migrations, and then python manage.py migrate, and we'll run the server. All right, so now that we have this, we want to create a post-save signal for the cart. And the reason I'm doing a post-save signal for tax total as well as total is because when we update the cart itself, we also update the subtotal. Which is what's happening here. So let's go down now, and we're going to create outside of the model, give it some space here. I'm going to create a receiver function for do tax and total receiver, and this is going to take a sender, instance, and then args and keyword args. And all we're doing here is we're going to be taking the instances total, so subtotal is equal to instance dot subtotal, and the tax total is going to be equal to the subtotal times some tax rate. In this case, I'm going to be doing 0.085, so that would be 8.5% tax, and then the total is equal to the subtotal plus the tax total. So now we just go to instance.taxTotal equals to tax total, and then instance.total is equal to total. All right, so now that we have this, I'm going to actually keep it as a pre-save signal, not a post-save, because we don't need to, let's call this total. We don't need to save it because then we're going to get a loop. It's going to loop around and around and around. If we do a post-save on here, because basically what we would have to do is instance.save. By using pre-save, we don't have to call that save method. So we'll do pre-save.connect. And this is going to be do tax and total receiver. And then the sender is the cart itself. All right, so let's take a look, and if I refresh in the cart, I get this unsupported operand type, decimal to float. So it has to do with our math here, because our decimal field, this is our decimal field, and the way this is all working out is not great for us. So we can't multiply decimals and floats, you have to multiply the same thing, just like what we saw before. So I'm going to change this to being a decimal. So save that, and then we'll refresh on our cart. And now we've got, well, it's not exactly two places. It's actually going a lot longer than that. So it's really simple to fix this. We are just going to go round, and then we are going to round this up. And we'll do the same thing with total. So round that as well. And use 2 for the decimal places. And we refresh. And then finally, we should have... We are still getting the decimal and float here, so let's try decimal at the tax total. And there we go. So it's not exactly super clean, but it's showing us exactly what's coming through. And if you do the math on it, it does work. If we change the cart item, notice the subtotal changes, but everything else doesn't. So if I refresh in here, it's only giving me 5.1, so it's not actually giving me 510, which is what it should show. But we go back, refresh, and it's going to show us exactly what the subtotal is doing. So let's before we actually fix that last part, we are going to go ahead and ensure that these are all being updated with the jQuery Ajax request. So down in here, we're going to have our request Ajax, and I'm going to copy the total, and we'll say cart total, and it's going to be cart item.cart, and we'll say total, and then finally it'll be tax total, total tax, or did we call it tax total? And we called it tax total, so back in here. All right, so we have our totals, and then the data in here, we'll put it underneath the subtotal. So cart total is cart total, and then tax total is tax total. All right, so now back into our view. Let's go in here and add IDs here. First off, we'll do tax total, and then cart total. In fact, let's actually put these into spans. I'll put this right here into a span and give it an ID of tax total. We'll see why in just a second. And then total, we'll give this also a span ID of cart total. Close off that span, get rid of this ID, and we're going to do that same thing for the subtotal actually. Span ID equals to subtotal. And we close that off. All right, so let's go back up to the Ajax call. And we had this one for subtotal. We actually don't want subtotal here anymore. We just want the data because we put it into the span and the data. Okay. And then finally, we'll put the actual other totals here. So tax total and cart total and tax total, cart total. I believe those use underscores, so let's look back into our view, and they do use underscores. All right, so now that we've got this, we can also put these things in deleted as well. So we refresh in here, and we update the cart, and notice the tax is not changing, but the other parts are. So the total is changing as well as the subtotal. So let's see why the tax total is not. It might have to do with the ID we gave it. Let's go back, and it is. Let's get rid of that underscore in there. We refresh, and now the tax total should change with it. Cool. So that is good as far as showing the tax itself, and we'll leave out total tax. We'll just put tax. And it's estimated. So now what we want to do is fix the 10.2 here. We just need to update the formatting of it to include 0. So let's go back into Sublime Text, and inside of our totals here, we're just going to add a way to format text, or excuse me, numbers like this, and we could use %.2f, and this will give us what we need. And we're going to do it for tax total as well as total. And then we also want to do it for subtotal when we actually set the subtotal, which is this up here. So we'll do the same thing for subtotal as well. And we're going to want to check this formatting. If we go back in here and refresh, it's not working. So it probably has to do with how this is working. So down here, let's put this subtotal into a decimal as well. So decimal of that, so we can actually perform the math between the decimals and the floats, and we refresh, and now it works again. So the subtotal's definitely going to have the same format as the other two, and the tax and everything coming through is working correctly. Now, of course, this tax percentage might have to change depending on what it is that you're working with. So there is another field that we could put in here and say tax percentage, and we put this as a decimal field as well. And decimal places, we'll give it 5. And then the default I'll set as 0.085. Max digits I'll put 10. So since we're doing this, let's go ahead and migrate it. So python manage.py, make migrations, and then python manage.py, migrate, and we'll run the server. So now in here, tax total, instead of decimal of this, we'll just do instance.tax percentage. And that should actually give us, well, it's going to give us the same results, but it's going to go off of now something in the database, so we can change it at any time based on the cart, or we could also set a tax percentage inside of the settings file. There's a lot of things that we could do with this particular tax percentage. And also the other important part is if they were adding to the cart and you wanted to set a tax percentage for that specific cart, you could do it in here. So cart.tax percentage equals to, let's say, 0.075. Right? So it's going to be slightly different. So to test that out, we'll log out and we'll create a new cart, add this item to cart, successfully added, and then we go to log the cart itself. And then I'm sure if you did the math here, it'll actually show you what that is, but we could also just print out the actual percentage that's coming through. So we'll do print instance.tax percentage, and we refresh in here. Let's make sure we actually run it, and it's showing that new tax percentage that's actually coming through, which is really important that you can actually change those tax percentages depending on what you're selling and where you are. All of that stuff's going to be different for so many people, so it's really hard to make a comprehensive tax percentage part, but at the very least you now know how you could set it per user. So this would be, if you had a specific user that had a specific tax percentage, you could say request.user, or excuse me, self.request.user and .get tax percentage if you had something like that as far as a call is concerned. So that's also another aspect of that. But now we've got our cart mostly done, with one exception. We don't have discounts and we don't have shipping. So since we don't have those things, we actually need to move into the next part, which would be the actual checkout process, which is going to change the subtotal tax as well as the total cart. So we would actually want them to kind of fix all of these things. So subtotal and total might not even show up here at the end of the day, but the point of showing this is to at least give the idea for the user what they're getting into. Now, if we did shipping and all that and want to put it into a running line item total, that's something that we might consider as well. So if you have any questions on what we did here, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.